Now we're having check. A design system. A design system is actually not something that you can describe very well, because it's basically some standards which you have at a company, which you decide, okay, this makes it a design system. And a design system you normally use when you want to have, and I'll skip a lot of the points, but what you actually do with a design system is you offer a framework where you can do stuff with components. So everybody is working with websites, so you know what components are. I'm not talking about web components, but just plain components. That can be HTML, things produced by JavaScript, you name it. That's what I call components. With a design system, you reuse components over and over and over again. And for instance, a very simple example of a component is a button. Everybody's using buttons in the websites, I think, so that's a thing you reuse over and over and over again. So why not taking the markup for a button, extend it a little bit, for instance, in your Fluid templates, and give some more functionality to it when you want to use it. So for instance, a button is just nothing else than the button tag and a text in there. Or you can have an anchor link, put the text in there and style it as a button. That's two variants actually of a button. Then after the text you want to have an arrow, like read more. You shouldn't never use read more because that's very bad for accessibility. But just an example, if you have the text read more and an arrow after that, that's another variant of your button. Let's say you're on a news article and you want to go back to the overview. Then you have the same button again, but the arrow is on the other side and pointing to the other direction. Go back to the overview. So those are all variants of a button. And the button is a component in a design system. So what you get in a design system is that people who start working with it are using the same words, because a component has a name. So I'm talking about a button. For instance, we at our company also have a call to action button, and everybody knows when you are mentioning a button or a call to action button what we mean. We have all kinds of components like accordions, a thing called Spotlight. Of course, we have the regular text and media elements from Typo 3, which contain multiple components because it's text and it's images or media. And those are actually more components within one bigger component. So you start to extract all these parts within, like for instance, the text and media, you start to extract it to different components and reuse them over and over again. Because looking at the text and media in the Typo 3 core, it has this image gallery in there, if you are using images. And also you have the content element called images, which shows only images. That uses exactly the same, it shares the same functionality in both these content elements. So what we do, and the core already did that, but what we do is then extract the image part to a partial in Fluid and reuse that over and over for multiple content elements. That's pretty clear, right? All right. So, like I said, you're going to use the same language in multiple teams, probably. If you're having a bigger company and have multiple teams, everybody should know what's in the design system and which names are used. And these names are very easy because somebody has given the component already a name. So you're going to use that name over and over again, and everybody knows what you're talking about. So if you want to have websites with components which you reuse in different websites, then you're going to talk about the design system. If it's only for one website, we're not talking about the design system at all. But, and it can be that it's not useful for your company, If you have custom websites for your clients and you start from scratch every time over and over again, because a component has to look and feel completely different than in another website, then I shouldn't start with it. But when you want to reuse components which you have used in one website and want to use it in the other one as well, with kind of the same look and feel, not completely the same, but kind of the same, then I would advise a design system. So why not using a design system? Like I told you already, there are some criteria why not to use it. It can be time intensive, especially at the beginning when you want to build up everything. It took us like a year to build up our design system. That's because we have more than, I think, 100 components. Well, more even, I think. When you break up your whole website, you get a lot of components. And we have, at our company, we have over 100 extensions of our own. And not every extension, of course, has a content element in there or has components which are for the front end, but still you get a lot of components. Like you start with a page header, break that up, and in the page header there's a logo, there's a search functionality, there's a main menu, maybe you have some other functionality going on there. Those are all different components again, and the page header itself is a component also, which incorporates all these other components. So it's really hard to build that up and put everything in partials and have everything in place, so the functionality can be changed for client A and that it can be different for client A and client B. So we have a lot of configurable partials in our design system. Also, and that's not a real problem at our company because we're quite small, but it can take a lot of time to learn other people the design system. It depends how big it is, how complex it is, and I will show you some different approaches from available design systems already. And it depends a little bit on how you approach your whole design system. For us, it's all internally. So, because you can, and I'll show you later, you can have a lot of documentation and stuff like that in the design system itself. We don't do that because we only want to have an overview of all the components with all the variants there are of this component. And yeah, like I told you, if you're starting from scratch with a project and you're redesigning and your components completely for each and every website, I wouldn't even bother to start with a design system. So, what are the elements of a design system? It's a design repository, as we call it, and the people working with it. And especially the design system repository contains some things which I will describe. And for instance, there can be the style guide. It's not necessary that the style guide is in there, but it can be that the style guide is in there. All the documentation, how do you handle certain stuff, how do you handle components, how do the headers look like, which colors are going to be used, stuff like that. That can be in a design system. A design system repository itself can also contain everything for a framework to run the whole design system. I will show you later how, for instance, the NL design system does it. Because they are using a real framework to get everything visual and to connect some stuff to each other of all the software they use in their design system. And next to the style guide, you have the component library and you have the pattern library. And most of the people think that it's the same, but it's not. Components are really back to the basic components like buttons, form fields, stuff like that. And patterns are more about the some components gathered together and showing them. So that's a pattern, because you're using multiple components within that pattern. Like a page is a pattern, for instance. So if you have a special page type and some functionality is going on, and that will probably have multiple components, that's a pattern. Then I want to tell you something about adopt versus create, because adopt is adopting to a design system, and to create means you're starting from scratch your website for each and every client. And the differences are when you adopt a design system, you have low cost normally. And when you start over and over again, you have pretty high cost because you have to design and build everything from scratch. While using a design system, you're reusing stuff. You have less customization in a design system, and when you do it for a client specifically, you have much more customization because you can change a component maybe from client A to B and change it completely so it has different functionality, so you're more flexible. While when you're reusing components, you're not as flexible anymore, or you have to put a lot of configurable stuff in there, so you can use it for client A and for client B, which have maybe different functionality for that same component. And your brand differentiation gets a little bit less when you're using a design system. We are having our design system for our clients, which are all municipalities in the Netherlands. So sometimes we get the remark that most of our websites, or most of the websites of our clients, look a little bit the same. And that's true for a design system. It doesn't have to be, but then you have to do a lot with your styling stuff. We still do a lot already because we're in our CSS, I think we have over, I never really counted them, but I think we have like over 20,000 CSS variables, which we can change. We don't do that, of course, but we can do it. And that also has to do when you define an H1 or an H2, for instance, you have a font size, a font weight, the color, stuff like that. But when you want to have the page title, which is H1 as well, you might want to use a different font size or a different color. So that overrides it specifically for the page title, so we have a new variable for that one. And that adds up, of course, and then you get to 20,000 of these variables. Not all of them are used, and if we are not using them, we comment them in the CSS, and that will be filtered out when it's rendered to the front end, the CSS file. I will show you some examples of how we are doing it. Let's see. We are using, at our company, we're using Pattern Lab, and Pattern Lab is pretty old. Pattern Lab was written in PHP originally, but some years ago they decided to leave the PHP world and go to Node.js. We already were using the PHP version, and one main advantage for us was that we can use fluid templates in Pattern Lab. And Pattern Lab is not connected to Typo 3 at all. There's no connection, nothing. The only thing you do in Pattern Lab is you're having your templates, and that can be like different templating systems. You can have a connector for different templating systems like Fluid. And you have JSON files, and those JSON files define all the variables which go to in these Fluid templates, partials, layouts, and stuff. And we were using Pattern Lab because we had this connection with the Fluid templates, and we could use them in there. And what happens in Pattern Lab is, the Pattern Lab approach was atomic design. So all the components are more or less built atomically, or atomic design is about a button is really a basic element. But when you're using that button within a pattern, then it suddenly can become a molecule. And when you have the final pattern, for instance, like a content element, that's an organism. So you can split up these components and patterns into different sizes, like the atom, the molecule, and the organism. Pages is a different story because that's separate from the molecules and atom stuff. Pattern Lab is old. It's not fancy. It's very ugly, actually. But for us it works because we are only using it internally. And what we do is we have these JSON files and these fluid templates, put all the variants, put all the variables in there. And for each and every variant of these variables, like if you turn on a setting true false, or give it a different color, or like the button arrow left or right and pointing in that direction or in that direction, that's all in these variables that we have. So most of the stuff we use in Pattern Lab are partials, because those are the smaller components and are reused over and over again in the big components, so in the organisms. And I'll show you, for instance, we have something which is called card lists, and we reuse cards over and over and over again. Like the highlight menu here is a card, and you can see a little bit that there's a box shadow around it, and there's a button in it, and an image, and some title. There can be a description in there as well, and we have for these card lists, these are organisms actually, so a real content element. For these card lists, they can have background colors as well. So you can see every variant, how for instance, the header, which color it gets. So when the background color is gray, we need a black header, and for blue background, we need a white header. And we have a lot of card lists going on. This is, for instance, featured on latest blog post. So this is also configurable, how many columns there are in a card list, stuff like that. And how the card looks like, because the card itself is also, again, a molecule. And that molecule can exist of an image, the title, maybe a date, because this is about a blog post, so you want to know the publish date, some text on it, and again, different background colors, and we see how it looks like. Here, for instance, there's no header, so the button goes to the below the cards, and when there's a header, the button is next to the header. So all these variants are in there. Blog posts, then we get something we call top subjects, which is also a card, actually. Featured on latest news, which kind of looks the same every time because we reuse stuff over and over and over again. So you see there are a lot of variants. This is featured on upcoming events, so we have events as well again. Jobs, projects, all that stuff is in here. So you see it's a very, 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 very long list of components. And this is a little bit how we work with Pattern Lab. So when we make a change, we only have to refresh. When we make a change in CSS variables, we only have to refresh the screen, and we see immediately all the changes. When we make a change in the templates, then we have to do a composer generate in there, and generate is a specific command for using in Pattern Lab, and it generates the HTML over and over again. A new example of a design system kind of thing is Storybook, and Storybook is very fancy. It's quite new, and you can do a lot with Storybook. In Pattern Lab, I didn't show you yet, but in Pattern Lab we can say, okay, how does the fluid look like, so I can look it up. How does the rendered HTML look like, I can look that up. It's funny because there are a lot of blank lines in there, because that's what you get in Fluid, blank lines. I can remove them, but I don't do that. So, and you can add some documentation to it, but we don't do it because it's all internally, and to do that for each and every client is a little bit too much of work. So, And the client doesn't see this. This is all for ourselves, and each and every theme for our clients has a pattern lab installation. So we can look up every theme, how it looks like, compared to another, stuff like that. Well, Storybook is kind of the same, but it's a little bit bigger than Pattern Lab. And what you see immediately, there's a lot of documentation going on here. So you can do a lot of documentation there. You can see some markup things. What are the WCAG demands specifically for this component? Then you can show the component, for instance, variable stuff which goes in there. For instance, this is about an alert, and we have an OK alert, a warning alert, an error alert, stuff like that. So this is Storybook. It's way more fancy, and we're going to switch to this one because we want to connect to the NL design system. And what the NL design system does is it connects Figma to Storybook and generates CSS variables directly from Figma. In Figma, you can have variables currently. The NL design system started with using Figma when the variables didn't exist yet, so they're using an extension for Figma called design tokens. And they're using these tokens to generate the CSS on the fly when you render the whole stuff and you render the Storybook. And you have all the CSS variables directly from Figma. So nobody comes in between. The designer can do everything he wants in Figma, changes all these design tokens, and you have, at the end, you have all the CSS variables for your components, which is awesome. Currently, what we do at our company is the designer makes a design, puts it in, he uses Sketch for that, and that's going to be a problem because Sketch is, at the end of the year, it will not work anymore. He puts that in InVision. I'll go to InVision and change all these CSS variables in our Pattern Lab installation or in the theme. Then I see it in Pattern Lab, and so I'm in between. And when we're using Figma and Storybook using the NL design system, we don't have to do that anymore, and the designer can do everything, and I'm out of the way there, luckily. Are there any questions about the design system? All right. It's funny, I'm one of the organizers and I don't know how much time I have left. Okay, 14, 15. But this one is a short one, actually. Any questions, design system? Nobody? All right. Then we go to Fluid. Who uses the inline notation? I think everybody. Probably you don't know yet, but when you do something like I have a paragraph and I want to have data dot header, this is already inline notation, but that's a very simple one. Normally I do this, actually. I'm always separating my tags, so that's why. In Fluid you can use the tag-based solution and notation and the inline notation. And I hate the tag-based notation because I think tags is HTML. And I want to separate, I see somebody, okay, it's not always possible with Fluid to do everything in inline notation. I will come to that, but normally I try to avoid as much as possible the tag notation. Because in my opinion, when I take a look in PHP Storm, I can see the difference very well between my HTML tags and the Fluid notation, the inline notation. And that makes a difference for me, that I immediately recognize all the HTML, which is differently from the rest. But okay, we have this tag-based notation, so we have the Fluid view helper translate. It has a key, and in that key it goes a long string. You can do the same for the inline notation. And what I normally do, because these notations can get very long. You probably know that. I don't know if you're using multi-line notations, but both, you're allowed for both that you, for instance, break it up into multiple lines. So it gets a little bit shorter and readable. I can do the same for the inline notation, like I have this F translate. Oh wait, this one I'll do back. I have the F translate, I have a key in there, and I'll close the whole thing again, and that's it. So this is what I normally do. I use multi-lines for my notation, and not only the tag-based, but also the inline notation, base notation. Then we have another one, tags in tags. Blah! Really? That's the most ugly solution I've ever seen, but it's possible. So never, never, ever do tag-based notation in tags, because that's getting very ugly. Most of the people will probably use the inline notation then. So like you see on this line, that the title has this translate view helper in there. But still, I think that could be different, and I will get to that later. One big advantage of the inline notation is that you can do chaining. You can't do that with tags. So I have a format padding view helper here, and in the format padding view helper is a format date. So normally I would just say, okay, do it like this, so it's a bit more readable, and then you know what's going on. But what's happening here with the inline notation is that I can do chaining. So it takes the value which comes from the first one and puts that value into the second one. So I have this variable post.date, and it goes into the format date view helper, and then goes into the padding, which is actually the same as what's happening here, but for me this is way more readable, and especially because I can do again, I can do this and say, okay, let's make it even more readable, and put it like that. Oh, wait, I have to indent these two, that one. And I can indent eventually everything into each other. Then the if condition, and this is a nice one, because the if condition you're using a lot in Fluid, probably, right? Yeah. There it's not always possible to use the inline notation, because a lot is happening between the if statement, and that might be HTML tag, stuff like that, and then I really use the tag-based notation of the if view helper. But normally I'll try to avoid that as well. I'll switch to inline notation. I will come to an example now. Like what you can do is, I have an if, and I can say, okay, the condition is, put the condition in there, and then I can say then. And when that condition is true, I will say, okay, there's a value, and that value is test. So this is actually the condition where I make this value, but it has no sense yet because it's not displayed anywhere, because I'm not using the tag-based notation, it's not anywhere. So what I do with this one is make a variable out of it. And the variable is a very powerful view helper within Fluid. So when I put a variable in there, I can say the name of this variable is testvar, for instance. And then I can push this variable to, like for instance, p, and then say testvar. You get this, right? All right. I can do the same here. What happens a lot, for instance, is that you need a condition where you want to change a class name or stuff like that. Conditions can get very long. And with inline notation, it's easier to read nested conditions and stuff like that, because you can do a lot of nesting in Fluid, you already know that. But with the inline notation, it gets more visible what's happening, especially when you're using multi-line. And at the end, I'll output a variable and use that variable in my HTML tag. So the whole inline notation is not within an HTML tag, but is kept outside, and that keeps your Fluid very clean. So if this was a class name, and I had here class equals, and then have this notation in there, this line gets very long. I can show it to you, but just make it shorter. You see already where I'm going, right? So, oh wait, the variable needs to be out, but this is what you can get, but the condition is here, not in here. So this probably might be a long condition with multiple statements in there, and an or and an if and an and stuff like that combined. So this line can get very long, and I actually want to use that class name just as the variable and put that in the class attribute of the HTML tag. So you keep it out of the tags itself, the whole condition stuff. Especially for conditions, this is very helpful to do. I have an example, for instance, how we do partials, and this is a little bit connected to our design system, so you know what's happening here. We have a partial called Open Gemeente Site List. And Open Gemeente Site, that refers to one of our extensions, which is called Open Gemeente Site. And that is a very basic extension which does a lot for all of our websites. And in that extension, there's a partial called list, and that list renders the card lists, which I showed you earlier. And you can see what's happening here, because a lot of partials are going, or a lot of variables are going into that partial to make sure that everything is configured well for this client. So the card gets a header layout, so the header needs a layout. This is going to be in H2. There are items in there, so that these are the actual cards. The card list should have a maximum column amount, so 2 or 3 columns wide. A card itself in our design system is using its own partial, so for news we have a different card than, for instance, for events. But that card, this card partial is only using the card list items, which are the news list items, and configuring the default card, what should be on the default card. This is getting a little bit hard, I think. But then you have the categories, which categories are maybe selected in the card list, because in the card list we can also have some filtering in there. With facets, faceting. So that's what card list is about. The faceting itself is giving all the categories which are available for the faceting. I'm not going to tell you something about flow, because flow is about how wide an element should be in our page. Then you have the regular page data, you have pagination for this card list, you have some query parameter key, and a card list is not what I showed you recently, but a card list is more like this one. Wait, I'll take another one. News lists with fasting, then you know what I'm talking about. So this is a card list for us. So there's vesting in there. We know which categories are selected, which cards go in there, how a card should look like, because this is a news card, it's a news list, so there should be a news card which has the publication date on it and probably an abstract of the news article, some categories, and all that stuff is going in here. And now you know why I love to have inline notation, because when you transfer this one to tag notation, you get a huge thing with a lot of attributes in there. And this is more readable than the whole tag thingy. This is pretty clear, right? Okay. Can I tell you a little bit more? Well, here, for instance, you see what I mentioned earlier about putting variables outside of the tags. Even this is not a tag, but it's put as a variable into a partial. So I have a variable called overview button text. It takes a label from a translation file, but only if the condition is true. And otherwise, it will take a text which is manually inserted by an editor. So the editor can overwrite the text from the translation file if he wants to. I'll put that in a variable, and I use that variable here and send it to open-gemeente link handling button, and this is actually our button partial. And I only, because that one has a lot of variables, a lot of arguments in there, I only use 4 of them, because I need a label, I need a parameter, so the page ID probably to go to. It gets some style, so it's normally a button, but I can override it with this class name, news featured and latest __ button. And it gets the site theme, and the site theme for us is very important because that one mentions the theme which is used in this website, and the theme name is in there, and then it knows where to fetch all the CSS files from. Are there any questions about the inline notation? I really can recommend it to do more with inline notation and go a little bit away from the tag-based notation, because then you have more the difference between your real fluid things and HTML. I'm sorry?
You can reformat now on PHP Storm.
No, I don't use it for templates normally. There's actually, and somebody pointed, that was you, right? Who pointed to, oh no, it was Rudy, he's not here. He showed me something which I didn't know, because there's a website called Fluid to Inline Converter, and you can actually put your tag-based fluid in there, and it makes inline notation from it. I don't know how it works with very complex tags, but I don't think that works. But if you want to see how some stuff is done, then yeah, go to this website. And it's not built by Joey from Beach, but he's currently maintaining it. So, yeah. Are there any questions? Was it that clear? Okay. Oh, thank you.
You who don't know me, I'm Martin from Midwald. I'm in charge of developer relations over there. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about code quality. I always like to introduce the topic of code quality with what's the actual only valid measurement of code quality. It's what the fucks per minute. Because who of you writes code? Which programming language ever, doesn't matter. Right, so I always find it relatively easy to write code that the machine can understand, like, for example, to write PHP code that is executed on the server, or to write JavaScript, which is executed by your browser. But I think many people often forget that you're also writing code for your fellow humans, for other programmers, for members of your team, or just the you of the future who needs to figure out what mess past you has made. So actually, it's far more important to write code that your fellow humans can understand than to write code that the computer won't understand. If there's a syntax error in there, that's easy, you can fix it easily, but if your code is unreadable because no one understands it, it will break as soon as the requirements break and you need you need to change your code. So this is why we're going to talk about code quality. By the way, as you may have noticed, there's no PowerPoint, there's no fancy presentation. This is 100% improvised. If at any point in the next 45 minutes you get the impression of that I'm making things up as I go, it's because I do. So we're going to be talking about code quality in Typo3 projects. There's a little bit of an origin story to that. So I have been passionate about code quality for quite a while, so as long as I have been writing code, I have learned that code quality is important because I've also learned what happens when you don't pay attention to it. I've seen PHP classes with thousands of lines of code which were basically written once, and you basically can't change them because no one is able to understand them. And ultimately, I stand by this meme. The only valid measurement to measure code quality is what the fucks per minute. But there are tools that we can use to help us measure code quality. Not because, hey, what's going on? Talk too much without doing anything. Thanks for nothing. There are tools that can assist us in measuring code quality. Who's using tools like any JavaScript developers? We have tools like ESLint or TSLint, for example. In the PHP world, we have tools like, is the code sniffer still around? PHP code sniffer? We have PHP lint. We have static analyzers. All of those are static analyzers. We have static type trackers, like Psalm is, for example, a thing, or PHP stan. They're both practically solve the same problem. And so we have tools that help us to statically analyze our code and to help us point out common mistakes that the developer may have made during programming, not like hard mistakes where you have a syntax error that is going to be caught anyway when you're executing your program, but maybe catch bad practices, common possible mistakes, or complexity issues that might make your code hard to understand. Those are things that we can catch using automated tools. And one of these groups of tools are called linters. I'd actually tried to look it up, why they are called that way. It goes all the way back to the 70s, where there was some tool for C development, where you could lint your C code. And the lint actually means like the lint that gets collected in your dryer when you dry your clothes, and then all the lint flocks off of your clothes. That's where the name comes from. Don't ask me to explain the metaphor behind that in too much detail. I don't really know myself. So my point is we have these tools that help us find common mistakes, common errors, common misconceptions in our code, and we have that for all major programming languages. We have those for JavaScript, we have those tools for PHP. I do a lot of Go development. There are tools for that language as well. In Java, there's check style, and basically for every ecosystem that we have, there are tools to help you statically analyze your source code and to help point out common mistakes. Problem is, when working with Typo 3, there are also other languages that rewrite code in. There's, for example, TypoScript. And a while ago, that's actually an understatement. I looked at the first commit that I made. The first commit was from 2014, so that's a solid 10 years ago. So that's how you notice you get old when GitHub says file last changed 10 years ago. So I was in university and I was hearing a lecture about building compilers. And we learned all about the theoretical backgrounds, like how grammars work and how compilers actually translate code into runnable software. And I was looking for some kind of problem that I could solve with this newfound knowledge. So literally, like you got a hammer, you're looking for nails to hammer in. That was me like 10 years ago when I heard that lecture. And I had a few Typo 3 projects back then, and I noticed, oh, there isn't any comparable tool for checking for common mistakes in TypoScript. And so at that time, I wrote a parser for TypoScript, and I also wrote the tool to check for common coding errors in TypoScript code. Not only coding errors, but we could also talk for days about code formatting. Code formatting is also important. Tabs or spaces? Anyone? Preference? Anyone? Spaces, 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 spaces. Tabs? Anyone? Anyone? Tabs? Okay. Doesn't matter at all. I remember that was even more than 10 years ago when we first introduced coding guidelines. When we were setting up our development workflow over at Midwald, and we also discussed about coding guidelines and coding formatting guidelines. And we had been yelling at each other for like half an hour because we couldn't find common ground whether we should use tabs or spaces to indent our code, and that was absolutely ridiculous. And the screen has already gone off again because I've talked too much. Yeah, I'll be back in a minute. Basically, these are entirely inconsequential. We also bashed our heads in about the opening bracket when you're defining a PHP function. Does it go at the end of the line or at the beginning of the next line? Also, that is completely inconsequential. No one cares about that, but it's important to have a common standard in a team, especially when you're doing things like auto-formatting and such. If you have one team member that uses spaces and one other team member uses tabs, and then you're doing auto-formatting and you have this massive pull request, 2,000 lines out, 2,000 lines going in, all because someone just switched all spaces to tabs or backwards. That is something that you do not want, and that is because it's important to have. Don't discuss about it too much. It's entirely inconsequential if you're using tabs or spaces. It doesn't matter at all, but what matters is that you're using a common standard in your team and enforce that standard. And there are also tools for that. Also for all common programming languages that help you enforce code formatting guidelines across your project. This is also something that I felt the need to build into the tool. And that was a very long introduction to the tool that I actually wanted to present. So, as you may have noticed a while ago, like 10 years ago, I wrote this TypoScript linter, and it has been around for a while. And I noticed that there were quite a lot of people actually using that thing, which made me happy, because that's how open source is supposed to work. So I thought I would take this opportunity to just show you how to use the TypoScript linter. Who's actually, anyone actually used it before, perchance? Okay. Sorry? Oh, no, the linter. Okay, awesome. So, I don't have a really good plan on how to walk you through it. I found a little example project that I'm going to demonstrate it. On. I'm going to show you what kind of common coding mistakes it is able to point out right now. And I would also be curious to hear from you what you think common coding issues might be when working with TypoScript, and how we could catch those. So I haven't been doing any professional Typo 3 development for quite a while, so I was struggling to actually find a project that I could reliably demonstrate this tool on. Some point like in 2019 or 2020, I built a website for my dad. He's a retired teacher, and he publishes teaching materials for other teachers and for students. And I built him a Typo 3 site for that. It looks like this. It's completely, it doesn't matter that much. Thing is, I wrote a whole bunch of TypoScript for that, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I think if we're going to throw the TypoScript linter on that project, it's going to point out probably quite a few issues. Let me switch to a terminal. Is that big enough? Probably not, is it? Yeah. Let's make it, how about this? Better? Okay. So we can install the linter via Composer. Yes, thank you, shell history. You can install it via Composer. There's also a file archive that you can use if you don't use Composer, or if you don't want to pollute your development dependencies too much. It does not bring too many dependencies. The linter brings a few dependencies on the Symfony framework, but those should be compatible with all major versions of Typo 3 that are out there right now. So you can easily install it using Composer, and then you get an additional command line tool in your project that you can invoke. And you can throw it at your TypoScript files. For example, let's throw it at all of them, see what happens. Yeah. It does check formatting, so it points out each and every the formatting error that the tool may have thought to have found. It also checks a few other things. It also checks, for example, for what do we have here? It also checks, for example, for your TypoScript nesting. If you're defining objects, it checks if the objects are nested consistently, or if, for example, you define a value in TypoScript, and then a few lines later down you overwrite it unconditionally, because that might be a common cause of confusion. It also attempts to check for dead code. For example, if you thought to remove some TypoScript code and you just commented it out, that is also pointed out by the tool, because typically that's what you have version control for. So those are all the things that the tool points out. And right now we see quite a lot of noise that is being reported because in its default settings, the linter expects code to be indented with 4 spaces. In this project, I didn't work with 4-space indentation, I worked with 2-space indentation, which is why we're getting a whole bunch of errors. By the way, because I know that question is going to be asked, the tool doesn't support automatic formatting yet. I would like to implement that at some point. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but if anyone, so it's open source, if anyone wants to contribute, please feel free to reach out to me. Be happy to accept any contributors on that. So I'm not going to bother to reformat all my TypoScript code right now, but we can have a look at how we can configure the linter to our own specific needs. Maybe that's a little bit more interesting. There's a configuration file that you can throw into your project. You can copy it from the vendor directory. There's a distribution YAML file that you can just copy into your project. And when we open it, it looks like, no, that's the wrong window. Here it is. And how do we, appearance, presentation mode, thank you. That's the config file for the tool. And basically how it works is you configure a collection of different sniffs that you apply on your code. I borrowed that terminology from the PHP code sniffer, I think. And each of these sniffs checks for one kind of common coding issue that you can make. For example, we can check for indentation. We can configure this to use tabs instead of spaces, which is not the default setting. We can also configure it to use 2 spaces for indentation instead of 4. It also checks for dead code. That is a heuristic, so there may be a chance of false positives on that. So if, for example, you say one of these checks does not make sense for my project, you can disable those. Always have to look up if it's disable or disabled. Maybe you should support both. Blah, 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 blah. Disabled, okay. Oh, where is it? There. There is also, I'm wondering why it's not in the default config. There is also a check for, I don't know who visited Hannes' session this morning. He told his war stories about people forgetting config no-caf in their TypoScript setup. There's also a sniff for that. So the tool helps to point out if you missed that somewhere in your setup. What's it called? Hang on. From a coding perspective, each of those is just a simple PHP class. If we have the time, we can also have a look at how to write our own, how to extend it with your own checks. So each and every one of those sniffs, you can actually, it's called config no cache. Thank you. And we can add that to our configuration file, and now we also check for that. So those are about formatting. This is a rule that checks for repeating values. and maybe suggests extracting those values, for example, into a constant. You can define exceptions for those. For example, if you're using data processes or something that doesn't really make sense to extract into a constant. It checks for duplicate assignments. If you, what I mentioned before, if you're assigning a value somewhere, and then 100 lines later down, you overwrite that value because someone just added it to the bottom of the setup without looking. It also checks nesting consistency, and we already talked about no cache. So we can then, and as you see now we have quite a fewer errors, because now the indentation is more or less consistent, not entirely as it seems, which stresses my point from a few minutes ago about applying coding formatting coding formatting guidelines consistently in your project, because otherwise you're just going to make a mess of it. Oh, there's actually config no cache in there. This is not rehearsed. I had no idea that was in there. So this is uncomfortable. Yeah, obviously all these other data processing classes should also be included in the as an allowed value, so that we don't get too many false positive reports about that. Yeah, a few warnings less. So you can run that tool on the command line. There's also a flag that you can use to make the tool exit with a non-zero exit code if there are any warnings found. That is useful if you're going to if you want to use the tool in a CI environment, which is what I would recommend, because who wants to run it manually after every? You could also include it in a Git hook, for example. So this is how you could invoke it in a CI environment, and the tool also supports different output formats. Like, for example, you could, I think it's -f. You can also get a check-style XML output file, which is the default format used by check-style, obviously, in the Java world. That is useful because many CI environments actually understand this file format. For example, GitLab CI understands this format, and can help you present all the reports that were generated by the tool directly in the GitLab merge request UI, for example, if you're using GitLab. Everything good so far? Any questions? Okay. If we were, question to you, if we were playing Make-A-Wish, what would be the most, if you think about all the times you work with TypoScript, what would be the most annoying error that you've found that you would like to see implemented in a tool like this? Anyone got anything?
Conditions? Yeah. In
how far?
Symphony expression language.
Yeah. Oh, the symphony expression.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think those are actually parsed. Yeah. So obviously, that's the obvious thing. We could try to include an actual syntax error somewhere in here. I don't know, maybe probably a space where no space is due. Then we get actually a syntax error, because if the file cannot be parsed at all, and that also includes the Symfony expressions inside the conditions. That gets reported as well. Yeah, that's not a specific sniff. That's an error that actually comes from the TypoScript parser, which then invokes the parser for the Symfony expression language. Yeah. Some limitations that might work out if I find the time. We've talked about the Symfony expressions and the conditions already. That was, when were those introduced? 8? 9? I remember when they were introduced, but I don't remember which specific version. It was a few years ago, I think. In some situations, you may have language features in TypoScript that are supported in one version of Typo 3 and not the other, because, for example, there was a new feature that was added, and the linter is currently not aware of which version of Typo 3 you're coding for. So, for example, if you were using, that's in the past, but if you were using a condition with the Symfony expression syntax and you had a project with a Typo 3 version that didn't support that syntax, the linter wouldn't know about it. So currently it has no knowledge of which version of Typo 3 you're using, and it does not have any concept of different language versions, so to speak. So that's something that I think might be added in the future. There's also the entire parser is subject to change because beginning with Typo 3.12, Typo 3 ships its own TypoScript parser. So it seems like a natural choice to use that instead of my own self-written parser. But at the moment, there are still versions of Typo 3 around that don't ship their own TypoScript parser in the core, because I think it was added with version 12. So, but I think in the future, if I find the time or if I find anyone who's willing to contribute, I'm going to replace my own TypoScript parser with the official one. And we can, oops, are there any other? Yeah, we already talked about auto formatting, because as you may have noticed, all the warnings that the linter presented about the annotation not being used consistently, that would actually be easy to fix in an automated way. So I think that's probably a low-hanging fruit. Haven't gotten around to building it yet. And if you're interested, I think we can also have a look at how to implement your own checks against any kind of coding issue that you might encounter in your own project. So, as I mentioned, these as I mentioned, all kinds of checks that we run against our TypoScript code are just PHP classes. So we can easily extend the linter with our own rules. And so I'm going to delete that, so we can start again from scratch. And to understand how this actually works, if you're doing static code analysis, we have to understand how a parser actually works under the hood. So the common architecture for parsing code is a two-step approach, where you first read the source code into so-called tokens. A token is basically nothing more than a string with a little bit of added context information, like where you know what kind of language element this is. For example, you could For example, for PHP code, you could say, oh, we have a PHP open tag token in line 1, then we have a few white spaces, those are also tokens. Then we have the class keyword, another white space, an identifier, then another white space, then an open brace, then another white space, then a closing brace. That's the first step when trying to parse a language. And that is already something that we can run automated checks against. And then the next step would be to translate this stream of tokens, like this stream of annotated strings of source code that you've read, into a more abstract data structure, which does not represent the actual textual representation of your code, but which represents the logical representation of the code. So that's called an abstract syntax tree, which is basically a much more abstract representation of your code, and it's represented as a tree data structure, because you have lots of nesting in there. For example, which with PHP you might have a class node in that tree, and that class node then has members for the properties that are defined in that class, or members for the functions that are defined in that class, and each function node then has, again, members for parameters or for the function body, and the function body, again, is a list of statements, and so on, and so on. And that way you get a very complicated data structure that represents the logical representation of your code. And the TypoScript parser basically does the same thing. That's another library which you can also take a look at, which basically basically there's a different PHP class for each and every language construct that TypoScript allows, and what the parser does is constructing this data structure from the TypoScript input, which is just plain text. So, for example, there's a conditional statement. And this allows us to, on the one hand, it allows us to walk through these data structures and to write our own checks in code to check other code. And in theory, we can also modify these data structures, which would allow us to, for example, reformat code, or also to fix common coding issues. Like, for example, some of the common errors that the TypoScript linter finds would actually, in theory, be automatically fixable. For example, like a duplicate assignment. If you assign one value to an object and then assign to the same value again, that would be easily fixable. Just throw out the first assignment. Might not be the best approach, would still require some kind of manual review, but in theory that would be fixable, and we can automatically transform the source code by applying operations on the syntax tree. So if we want to extend the linter to implement our own rules, we can implement one of two interfaces. There's a token stream sniff, and there's I think it's a syntax tree. Yeah, it's a syntax tree sniff. These interfaces prescribe a few methods that we need to implement. There's a constructor which receives any kind of parameters that we set in the configuration file, like basically anything that we define in here gets passed into the constructor of that class. And then we have the actual sniff function, which receives, in this case, basically just an array of tokens. Token is not much more than a type and a value. Like, the type is, you have a whole lot of constants over here that describes all the different kinds of tokens that that we can have. And then we can basically do with those whatever we want. So for example, if we want to say, there are two different syntaxes for including files. There's the add import statement, and I don't know if it's actually still supported yet, but there was this XML-like syntax that we could use. So for example, we could write a sniff to just say, we don't want to use this old include TypoScript syntax anymore. Then we could iterate over the token stream. Could test if there is one of these tokens in the token stream, and could then add an issue that this file parameter that we get is basically a container for any kind of issues that we want to report to the user. So we can report, usually we should also report where we found this issue. If the user is supposed to fix it, it would be courteous to tell them where in the source code we found the issue. So the token data structure contains all these metadata, so we can reuse those. We can choose a severity. For example, if we want to report this as an error or just as a warning. And that should basically be it. You guys know about the demo effect, do you? So we'll see if this actually works. We have to modify the configuration file first to actually support the sniff. Oh. Basically, we can supply any class. It just needs to implement one of those two interfaces, and it needs to be auto-loadable via Composer. So those are the requirements. And in theory, that should already work. Yeah, don't get any errors, but I also think I haven't used any of these old style includes anywhere. Oh, we still have that syntax error in there. Whoops. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, that's how you could go around to implement your own. Basically, any kind of additional check that you would want to implement in there. Is there anything else I could present? As I mentioned, this is all improvised. You guys have any questions? Or any kind of feedback, anything that you would want to see added to the project? Oh, a PHP Storm integration.
As I said, I
Yeah.
don't know how complex this could be.
I don't either.
I see.
I would actually have to read up on that, but possibly maybe with a little IntelliJ plugin could work. Yeah. I have no idea how that would work out, because I think for most of these static code analysis tools, you have
dedicated integrations
in PHP Storm, for example. Oh no, this is IntelliJ, not PHP Storm. No, then I don't have any idea how it's included.
But for example, I think PHP Storm or IntelliJ basically they're the same product. I think there's no switch in which you can basically integrate any kind of static analysis tool, but I think there's always a specific switch for enable TSLint or ESLint or Prettier or whatever. So one would probably have to build their own IntelliJ plugin to integrate it. I actually don't know how hard that might be. Never done it. Yeah.
Probably Kotlin, maybe. I don't know if they migrated to Kotlin.
Wouldn't make it better for me.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else?
For the sake of my sanity, can you please remove the config no cache right now?
Happily. Set up TypoScript line 4.
I honestly don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, there it is.
What a relief!
Disaster averted.
10 times faster now.
Maybe even more.
All right, so the project is on GitHub. If I've piqued your interest, feel free to check it out. If you have any additional ideas or feature requests as an issue tracker, feel free to use it. I'm always happy to accept any kind of contributions. Also a big shout out to Olli Klee, who helped me prepare the linter for, I think, for Symfony 7 compatibility, which is, I think Typo 3.13, isn't it? Yeah, so shout out for that. And yeah, go check it out. Thank you. So now how do I turn this off?
accessibility because next year in June, in the EU, becomes the law that digital services have to be accessible. So that's this page. It's for all EU countries. Now you have the time to prepare for the accessibility, but probably next year people will realize that the law will take in effect, but now you have the time to prepare. Yeah, I'm a freelance developer, so I've been interested in accessibility a lot of time. I've done a couple of government projects where it's already mandatory. But now also for businesses have to have accessible websites. It's not quite clear which website has to be accessible. This, if you provide a service, so small websites are exempt. But for example, web shops have to be accessible. Any websites that customers have to log in have to be accessible. So any mail in. Yeah, if you provide the service, so then the thinking is if customers have to rely on your website to get a service, so then it has to be accessible. So if you sell insurance or a bank, so people have to use their bank account or look into the registration for your insurance. What's my insurance? What's my policy? What I have to pay? Or even if you have like a newsletter and people want to sign up, so they have to be capable to sign up. And also. Yeah, it's all companies, yeah. Yeah. So this is good to get informed about the subject. So because next year will take come into effect, and clients have to implement it. So it's good to warn clients now that it's coming, so that they don't get surprised. And there are a couple of things you can look into. There are, of course, the W3C has guidelines for a long time. This started in 1999, so it's not a new thing. And they have a lot of information. If you do tests, then all the testing tools is for the W3C standards. Like national governments do their own implementations. Sometimes, like in Germany, they have the BitFAU. That is basically the web WCAG guidelines, but then in German law. So it's almost 100% the same, but Germany wanted to have their own thing. So they test also those rules, and so there are a couple of tools I have used to get started. It's like easy to go to page speed from Google. I took not completely random website. They show you can run it, and then it says here accessibility. You get a score and tells you what you can improve. yeah, quite common is like color contrast. That's almost any website has problems with that. But this is like a quick way to get into accessibility testing. It doesn't test a lot of things, but like the most important parts, and also the things that can be tested automatically. But you can also use this in the browser. This is called Lighthouse, also in Chrome-based browsers. You get a lighthouse effect, and page speed insights is based on Lighthouse, so you get the same results. So you can do it in the browser and then run the analysis, and then you get basically the same report. So you don't have to use the website. But yeah, there are some differences, I don't know, because the score here was like 77 and it's 75, so...
Most of the times Lighthouse is a little bit behind, I've noticed.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe with the next new version, then you have the same results as you have right now in page speed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so yeah, but yeah, that's like the easiest ways to get started. So you can improve those things. Another tool I like to use is Wave. That's created by a company who specializes in accessibility, and you can install it in the browser. I've read it here, so you can start it, and then it shows what problems there are, and it's on the page. You can see where the problems lie. So this, for me, this is the best tool to use at the moment, and it also says like errors, and so details. Yeah, you can go to the errors and say, yeah. Missing alternative text is also a common problem. So, yeah, you should provide an alternative text. So there's a lot of things you can test. It's not always dependent on developers. So alternative text is something that's like editors have to provide. So the developers cannot do so much, but like contrast errors, yeah, that's something that designers have to solve. So as a developer, you cannot just change the colors. So you have to talk to the designers.
I can see. Would those tools find something like red-green buttons for contrast?
Yeah, so that,
good
I'm
question.
not quite sure, because yes, color blindness.
Yep.
Don't think that they will violate contrast, but yeah, they have to do a different tool to check the color blindness, because there are also different types of color blindness. So the red-green is the most common, but
not everything is testable automatically. So there's always manual testing involved, especially when you want to have a report what you need for your website. So yeah.
So he will only find the contrast between too dark and
yeah, he looks at the font and the background color, for instance. Yeah.
So this, yeah. But this is just one page, so you have to do also test multiple pages to find everything. So usually what I do or testers do is look at the most important pages and test those ones, because it's not possible to test like all pages. If you have a website with a couple of thousand pages, then it's too expensive to check every page. Yeah, like Wave is one of those tools. What I also like to use is from Microsoft, is Accessibility Insights. Yeah, here I have the options to do test it. Also, it's called FastPass, and has also the option to do a walkthrough for an assessment, but this more intended for testers, that they have like a checklist from if everything passes. So this is a good start. So this, and also here you get the list with the problems that are found. Yeah, interesting thing is here the depth stops. Change it. Pass. Okay. It's not any. In the past, they showed the tab stops on the page from how the tapping order is. So apparently they changed it recently. So that is also a tool you can use. It only works in Chrome-based browsers. Now it's here. It shows here on the page where the problems are. So maybe now tab stops work. No. Okay. Not so important. So that's one of the tools you can use. Also, except inside the browser and the developer tools, like in Firefox and in Chrome also, we have accessibility tab. So you can inspect different elements, and then you get what's called the accessibility tree. And then it shows, like here, the image has an accessible name. So in this case, type 3 Camp logo. Okay. So that's what a screen reader pronounces. And yeah, the role is image is clear, and the value is what the link is. So you can test what the browser sees. So you can know what the screen reader should get. But yeah, this if you want to go into detail in your website. The screen readers, there are different ones. For Windows, you have the NVDA screen reader that's free. So I always recommend, if you use Windows, to install that. But it's you have to get used to using screen readers. It's not, if you've never done it, then it's not quite easy, and so you have to like practice and get slowly into it. So it's not my recommended way to get started. So if you know a little bit about accessibility, then like if you want to go deeper, you can try to read a screen reader. On Mac you have VoiceOver that's built into the operating system, so that's already available. Yeah, so these are some tools you can use. What would be interesting, of course, if you want to automate tests. So this Xcore exists as a library, so that you can use in your testing infrastructure. So that's something you can use to automatically test things, but you have to configure it yourself. I haven't really used it yet.
They have a Chrome extension as well.
Yeah, okay.
It's quite good actually.
So extensions.
Search for X.
X. Not found? Okay.
They are promoting the Chrome extension on their website.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
That one's pretty good as well.
So
it looks a little bit like the wave thing. There's things on screen as well.
yeah. So, but I believe they also have like a pro version.
Yeah, it's a free version, but there's a pro version as well, and then you need an account for that. But you can use the free version, and it's quite good.
Yeah. So that's the tools that I know. So maybe somebody have other tools they use. Yeah.
They use some tools from Biene Award. In Germany, the Biene Award was in Germany. You can win an award for accessibility for websites.
Yeah, but that, yeah, but it doesn't exist anymore.
I think
like,
it doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Then there was something like Einer für alle oder Eines für alle. There was even a website I didn't find anymore. It's from associations of Behindertenverbände.
Yeah, there are a lot of like
they had
associations for the blind and for the deaf. That they have like their own checklists and recommendations. So it's always good to look at websites from those organizations.
So what is the amount of accessibility in points, 77%, that you need to...
100.
Yes? Even for companies, not only for... Okay.
Yeah. So,
but how can you act with Gehörlosen?
Yeah, deaf people, well, they're of course different.
You can't test everything, but yeah, you need to cover it.
Yes, but I don't know how. It's unpayable.
What do you mean?
To make Gebärdensprache, to integrate Gebärdensprache into websites.
Yeah, okay, yeah, there are different levels of accessibility. So you have the W3C standard, there's level A, this is like the basic, and then AA, and then AAA, and like the AA is what usually is trying to achieve those levels, but then AAA is like also from like for deaf that videos have to be subtitled. You know, with sign language, this only for like live things. So subtitles are also one solution. So that's usually cheaper, and so like
I
some
think
software tools.
the subtitles are in the AA and the sign language is in the AAA. I think.
Yeah?
But
Okay.
not sure. I don't know for the European Act. Is that AA or single A that you need? I think the single.
Single? I'm not sure, but
Me neither. But I think the single.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what's also if you say, I'm making my website accessible, it doesn't have to be fully accessible on day one. So you can say you pay somebody to make a report. So from this are the issues we found, and you can say on your website, so okay, our website has this and these issues, and we're working on it. So then you buy like time. So you say, I'm going to improve it. So that is what is allowed. So you have to get started to work on accessibility. What usually happens is somebody pays somebody to make a report, and then the report lays something and nothing happens. So then I think, okay, if you don't have a plan what you want to do with the report, then it makes not a lot of sense to get a report. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, oh, we want to know where we stand, and so they do some testing. But if you don't know, then it's usually clear that you're not accessible, because if you know that you're put effort into it, then you already know that the report will not be terrible. But you can, if you don't pay any attention to accessibility, and then you say, oh, I want to know where I stand, then you should think beforehand, so where you want to go. But now the law is coming, so people have to implement accessibility, and it will be interesting to see what is going to happen.
Well, yeah, we have accessibility every year, because I talked about accessibility last year. So.
Yeah. So.
Needs to show an accessible website.
I think the biggest problem we're getting, especially companies are getting, is like, for instance, with Typo 3, that you have extensions which are in the TER, and for instance, do strange stuff which is hard to make accessible, or JavaScript stuff. That's the hardest part, I think. And some navigation stuff, menus, stuff like that. That can be a big problem just to solve that. And especially when you get external JavaScript stuff like a slider or whatever. Already start searching for accessible sliders. I don't know if you know the slick slider, but that one is accessible already. Okay. And there are more of these JavaScript things which are already taking accessibility into account.
This one?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Made an update about this VS slider to make it accessible.
Yeah, so I don't know, like Typo 3 had a couple of years ago like some funding to improve accessibility, but this was like I believe on the back end, not the.
Yeah, they're working on the back end.
Yeah.
Because that's becoming mandatory as well to have the back end accessible as well.
Yeah.
Especially in government, I think they need to be compliant with all the apps and things to be accessible. So we are working with municipalities, and the editors from municipalities they need actually an accessible Type 3 backend as well. So that's where the focus currently of Type 3 is.
Yeah, yeah, because also for
Type 3 not that interesting simply because there's not much front end. Most of the companies, the agencies, are providing their own content elements and stuff like that. So they need to take it into account, not Type 3 itself for the front end. There's hardly anything. Yeah, well, the form, I think, but and they did a pretty good job last year. So there's currently a version 2 of the form which you can enable, I think, or it is already enabled. There are 2 types of templates currently with the form extension, and one of them is accessible. We did some minor changes to it because I thought we like to handle that a little bit differently, but it is accessible already, the form at the front end.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's hell.
Yeah, there are different standards for like the A tag, what is it called, I believe.
Yeah.
That's for yeah, editors, so not for the website. There are the different standards for that.
And the whole problem is, of course, with the core and the backend, is that every developer and every contributor should be aware of accessibility. Otherwise, who's going to check this? We talked about that already 4 years ago. When a change is coming in for the Type 3 backend, who is going to check if it's accessible, yes or no? So every new thingy, especially because the backend is a lot of JavaScript stuff, that needs to be checked each and every time on each and every change, and that's hard to do, I think. But yeah, but they make a start, and yeah.
We talked about videos and accessibility. I can make smarter if I link to videos on YouTube. Bin ich dann raus aus der Nummer, oder?
YouTube hat auch die Möglichkeit.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And there are also trends.
I think the player also accessible? I don't know if YouTube itself.
I'm not sure.
I think so. They should do that.
But
A lot of big companies are already having accessible stuff. Like here in the Netherlands, we have bol.com, which is the Dutch Amazon. They're completely accessible. Or they, I think, for 99% accessible, because otherwise they are losing clients. And companies like Amazon and stuff like that, they really need to take this into account already. Otherwise, they miss half of their money. And also YouTube with their videos, I think, well, if it's completely accessible, I don't know, but I think that they already did work on it.
Yeah, on YouTube you have automatic like subtitling.
Yeah, but also the player itself, that it's accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's usually a problem if you,
You need an accessible video player. Yeah. In the Type 3, we have one, and that one is based on what's it called? Oh, come on. Media element JS. It's not fully accessible because I have still some pending patches there. Which are not in Media Element JS. We did some changes for our company and we gave to them, but they're still not done. But they are really focusing on accessibility, and there are more JavaScript solutions for this, and which are accessible. It's not the only one.
Yeah, well, like the default HTML5 functionality is not completely accessible, I believe.
No.
Yeah. So you have to use like some JavaScript player to implement that.
And Media Element JS is quite good for this.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just the part that you actually can play the video or stop the video. That's also a thing, like auto-playing videos. If you go to a website, then the video already starts to play. So, yeah, that's something you probably shouldn't do.
Yeah, or the place forbidden. Not fully. Animation should not take longer than 5 seconds. Or you need to provide a play-pause button. So people need to be able to pause it, especially people like, for instance, with the epileptic disease. They're really vulnerable for fast changes on your screen. So that's why they said, okay, animation should not take longer than 5 seconds and then stop it. Or if it continues, then you need to provide that button. Currently in the operating systems, and I think all of them currently already have a setting that you don't want to have animations in the accessibility tab of the operating system. And you can read that setting in the browser as well with JavaScript. So you can actually already see, okay, this person doesn't want to have any animation or whatever, and you can just stop and just don't play it at that point.
But you have to actively do it.
Yes, you have to actively check if that one is on, but still you need this 5-second rule, because it's although the operating system setting is still already there, you still need to do that 5 seconds or play pause currently, because the setting in the operating system is not that old.
I think from a moral perspective, you just shouldn't autoplay ever.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
No one likes it.
See, like yeah, but also like sliders. They a lot of companies are using sliders or stuff like that on the homepage. And
why?
Yeah.
Why? It's
Good
fancy.
question, but
Okay, I can show one website that has an auto-playing video, and that's my website.
Is it accessible?
So, yeah, this is just the background. So it's not interrupting anything. Also have built in, and with JavaScript, if the setting is I don't want to have animation, then it doesn't play.
Yeah.
And I added like a stop button, but I doubt that anybody immediately will notice that the background is moving because it's so slow. So that's so. But yeah, that is my whole website. It's just one page, so I want to add something fancy. But that's just for decoration. So yeah, not essential for the website.
The background is like the weather outside?
That is the view from my home office window. I live in Frankfurt, so that's that's all the planes fly there.
I have one question to all of you. Images and alternative text. So as we have some header pictures where only for beautiful, for the beauty of the site, they're not necessary for understanding the website, you know? So, and we always discuss if they need an alternative text, and I think not, because the screen reader would read some unnecessary stuff.
It depends, and this is one which is hard to test because there's a human being involved in testing with this one, because it really depends on the context.
Well, you should always have the alt attribute.
The alt attribute needs to be there, but it can be empty.
It can be empty.
Yeah, and it's even like say you have a card on your screen with a news article in there, and it has an image and it has a title and a description and stuff like that, and it's all within one card. then you, and the image can be described by the title of the news title, you can leave the alt empty. And also, like you said, images which don't have any meaning to understanding the website, leave it empty. And some automated accessibility tools are complaining about it, but you should just simply ignore them if you think that it's right. And that's what, yeah, they test it, and most of them now just say, okay, it's empty, and give a warning about that, not make an error, but give a warning. Just to let you know, okay, check this one, if it needs to be empty, yes or no, and otherwise, yeah, ignore it.
Then just leaving a little word like header image. Or
yeah, that doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah. Better empty. Yeah.
I'm thinking about those. You told us that 100 points would you want to achieve.
Yeah, but that one isn't. I don't think it's in Lightspeed or PageSpeed, in Lighthouse or PageSpeed at all. It will only, it's not an error. It will mention it, probably, but the scoring is not going down with that.
So what about, for example, news? If you have a news list with a small image and then go to the detail, news, so then I need to describe this image 2 times. Or I have it's the same image in the list and in the detail.
You need to describe it 2 times.
So and then it's described 2 times.
It depends on the context. If the image is already explained by the title of the news article and the markup is good, then yeah, you can leave it empty.
Yeah. Even the camera symbol for empty image.
Yeah, it's always discussion what you should describe and how detailed you should describe images. So it's always, it's not something you can automatically test. So, yeah, if you have to use your own judgment.
Do you need to get a certificate for accessibility web pages?
We're working for Dutch municipalities, and yes, there we need a certificate. So each and every website needs to be tested in each and every government website in the Netherlands need to be tested, and we need a. But you're talking about the European Act. He knows more about that one.
Well, you have to be accessible, so
you need to prove that. Somehow.
Yeah, you would have to prove it somehow. Yeah.
He says you're not accessible, then I need to work on it, okay, but I can't put a certificate on the website that said it's improved by.
No, you have to have like a page and list all your accessibility, how accessible your website is. And then you have to list all the problems on your website.
Add more and more images without.
You should learn the editors what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, they need to be trained. Yeah. And yeah.
For sure. Yeah, but then this certificate is useless because it says on.
Sure.
Well, the main basics of the website are tested, and at a certain time point. A website always changes, so what they do is you have it tested by a person or an agency, get that certificate, and that certificate is for that certain time point that it has been tested. That does not mean that the website is always accessible, but at least you have proof that the agency who built it took accessibility into account when building it. And whatever changes are done after that, and what editors do, that's not really important at that point, because you can't. It's impossible to continuously test websites. That's impossible to do for accessibility. Yeah. That costs a lot of money to do that.
Yeah, well, you can automate some parts.
Yeah, some parts you can automate, but most of it is just a human being needs to do that. And, yeah.
So if you develop like a new website and you have do continuous integration, it makes sense to add some automated testing. That's like if developers create a new component that the tests run, and so there is a problem. So you can prevent that something like that goes to the production.
Accessible website, you want to be proud of it and you want to show the world that you're accessible. So
well, you can always. Yeah, of course. If you have a report and it says 100%, of course you can put it on your website.
And check it once a week, so to earn money with step 3.
Yeah. Okay, I believe it's almost time to finish. Yeah.
It was the last on the Saturday, so didn't eat that here.
So, anybody know any questions? No. Okay, then thank you.
Please stay here for the ending session.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. Welcome back here for this year for the last time in this beautiful location. I hope you enjoyed those 2-3 days over here at this event. That sounds very good. And also looking here at the amount of people on Saturday, it's looking very great with those many people. So I think that's a very good sign for this event. So thank you very much for being here. Yeah, just a very quick one. I would like to thank, first of all, thank you all for being here. So thank you very much. And for the rest, as I said already yesterday, thank you very much everybody. Speakers, sponsors, organization team, Patrick, Mirna, and the people already left, location, video team, everybody around. Thank you very much for this beautiful event. I hope you had a lot of inspiration, new connections, ideas, and energy, and to have a fresh weekend, to get some sleep. And of course, it's already over there. We hope to see you again next time in this location. Please, if you have some ideas, suggestions, please come back to us in Slack channel, in the mail, on the website, on the forum, or whatever. Please come back with feedback, ideas. You're warm welcome. And also, please spread the word around so that we have as many people, or even more people, next year around here at this event. Thank you very much. Have a good trip home. Just one last thing. As I just thought about it. If this is an event for all of us together, if there are some volunteers to help with cleaning up this room, it would be really appreciated. So thank you for that.